Okay, I think that we're ready. So first of all, welcome everyone to this new webinar. This webinar is part of the UNESCO Chair in Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Engineering webinar series. The title of the session that we have today is Resilient and Sustainable Schools, a Life Cycle and Multi-Objective Approach for National School Infrastructure Plan. Before I present the webinars, we just want to mention that we have a series of upcoming webinars already planned. For the end of May, we have a webinar by Professor Bas Jongman on adaptation to sea level rise in the Netherlands and around the world. Bas Jongman is a professor from Delft University. On June, around mid-June, we will have Professor Paul Bates from Bristol University and Fathom. He will be explaining or giving a lecture on simulating 2D hydrodynamics at 30 meters resolution for the entire planet. And for the beginning of July, we will have Dr. Asana Paramal-Bateri from the UNESCO Chair and Professor Ji Yoon Byun from Glasgow University with a talk titled Community Hazard Risk Assessment Tools, Structural Fragility and Vulnerability System Reliability Mapping. This will be more a course than a webinar. If you are interested in any of these, you can go to the UNESCO Chair website. There's all the information of the webinars, and you can also register in there. I am very happy now to introduce the panelists for today's session. First of all, we have Karina Fonseca Ferreira. Karina is a disaster risk management specialist in the World Bank, and she is co-leader of the World Bank Global Program for Safer Schools. She has several years of experience working with governments on improving school safety, and Karina holds a PhD in earthquake engineering from University College London, actually working with Professor Dina Dayala, the UNESCO Chair. We are also very happy to have Sonia Giovinazzi. Sonia is the scientific project leader at ENEA. She is also a full professor in civil engineering at Sapienza University of Rome. And she also is a coordinator of the joint program of smart cities within the European Energy Research Alliance. Sonia also holds a PhD in civil engineering and risk management. Then we will have Jingje Wu. Jingje is currently a disaster risk management consultant, also for the World Bank Global for World Bank's Global Program for Safer Schools. She also has a lot of experience working in different countries on projects around disaster risk reduction for school infrastructure. And Jingje holds a PhD in civil engineering from the University of Maryland. And finally, I will also give a part of this session. So my name is Rafael Fernandez. I am working as a research fellow within the UNESCO Chair in Disaster Risk Reduction and Resilience Engineering, and also as a consultant, as a disaster risk management consultant for the World Bank's Global Program for Safer Schools. So we are all very happy to be here. Thank you very much for all the attendees. And Karina, please go ahead. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Rafael. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. I will show a short presentation. So it's a pleasure to join you today and to join our partners, UNESCO and UCL, to discuss about this important topic. This title, Tomorrow's Never Closed, it means that for us, a resilient school is not only a school where the life of school community is protected, it's also a school that will be able to continue delivering education when shocks hit communities. And this is very important given the contribution of infrastructure to learning. Our education colleagues, they say that school infrastructure is the third teacher. And as such, school infrastructure also is an important contributor to address what our education colleagues call the current global learning crisis. And today we are going to discuss one of key attributes of schools as a third teacher, which is their capacity to deliver education during times of crisis. So the recent earthquake in Myanmar is a tragic reminder that we live in a world where schools can collapse in an instant. And the crisis like this one hit the most vulnerable first. And often children suffer the most. This disaster is just one of many that have caused immense human and education losses in schools for far too long. Our global risk assessment shows that 6 million children have their education disrupted by earthquakes alone every year. And you can see here on this slide that more than half is in East Asia and in the Pacific. And the risk of earthquake-related fatalities in schools is 3 times higher in low and lower middle income countries compared to higher income countries, which means that risk is not just about the hazard and the probability of an event to happen in that place. Risk is also related with the socioeconomic context of those communities. If we look to other hazards, for instance, tropical cyclones, they add an additional $3 billion in damage to schools every year. And again, low-income countries with the highest rates of learning poverty is also at the highest levels of risk. And even if we look to other types of crises like conflicts, the data that we have is very concerning. We estimate that over 20 million children from conflict-affected countries are currently out of school. So at the World Bank, our group have focused the past 10 years in trying to address this question. How can we ensure children continue to learn during times of crisis? Scientists and engineers, including UCL and many other research institutions all over the world, have made great progress in understanding how school buildings perform during earthquakes and other hazards. But the challenge is the scale of the problem. We estimate that more than 1 million school buildings worldwide are likely to perform poorly in the face of disasters. So retrofitting all these buildings seems an impossible task. And that is where we have concentrated our efforts working with governments in our client countries. We learned that this technical knowledge is not being reaching policy and decision makers. And we believe that that is essential in order to inform school infrastructure policies and investments. So our group at the Global Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery have been working hand in hand with governments and communities to design and implement public policies and investments that improve the resilience of entire education systems. We also have been supporting the countries in the resilient recovery of educational systems after disasters. And GFDRR in particular, over the past 18 years, has shifted the focus from disaster response and recovery to prevention, preparedness, and anticipatory action. So we provide financial support, technical expertise, and we produce knowledge aiming to inform those large-scale policies and investments. So we have been working in more than 40 countries at the moment. Our investments and technical assistance has benefited 140 million students so far. And one of the countries where we have a strong engagement with the Ministry of Emergency Situations and with the Ministry of Education is the Kyrgyz Republic. And today in this webinar, you will hear specifically about that project in the Kyrgyz Republic. But in order to support all these projects in these countries, we have developed knowledge products like the Roadmap for Safer and Resilient Schools and the Global Library of School Infrastructure. So these tools were developed based on the operational knowledge we have gained over the past decades working in all those countries. So in order to develop the Global Library in particular, we have joined efforts with UCL, with Los Andes University, and with other partners. And we believe that this has been an important game changing, the development of these tools, because it has allowed us to support our client countries in implementing integrated and large-scale policies that are able to address the problem of school resilience, but making the most efficient use of the available local resources. But safety is not sufficient. Is essential, but is not sufficient. In order for school infrastructure to be able to effectively deliver quality education, there are a number of attributes that schools needs to have. And the World Bank will be launching in May, so this month, what we call the Right Plus framework. So this is a framework that has been developed by our group and by our education global practice, and brings together an integrated approach to address the quality of school infrastructure, or as they call PLEs, the physical learning environments. And we identified 5 key attributes. So resilient, one of them, but also physical learning environments need to be inclusive, green, and this is more and more relevant because of climate change, healthy, and they need to foster teaching and learning conducive environments. And finally, achieving these high quality physical learning environments is only possible if there are strong institutions and technical capacities in our client countries to implement the interventions that are needed. And this comes together also with financing mechanisms that are also compatible with the local economic constraints and affordable for the local institutions and communities. So that's why that part of how those institutions need to equip themselves with those capacities for effective implementation is also part of this Right Plus framework. And you will see that that institutional capacity is also critical in most of our projects. And you'll see that clearly in the project that we will talk today in the Kyrgyz Republic. So again, we think that this is a dialogue that needs to be promoted and to continue. So if you wanted to know more about the work we are doing, in these 14 countries, you can see information on our website. And I will give the floor to Sonia, Ginger, and Raphael to present about this engagement in Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karina, for this great introduction. I would like to thank Dina, Dayala for the opportunity to speak in this prestigious UNESCO Disaster Risk Reduction Seminar. And indeed, I would like to thank Karina for the opportunity to collaborate in this great project of global project for safer school and in its implementation in the Kyrgyz Republic. As Karina was mentioning, we want for the schools not only to be resilient to natural hazard, but to have, as Karina said, several other attributes. At the time of the project, we were talking about economic sustainability, environmental protection, and social benefits. So having an investment that could maximize holistic benefit for the school, for the children, and for the teacher, as well as for the communities. Okay. Good. So you can see the need for all these attribute or achieving all this of this outcome from intervention in this slide that in very short is representing the situation in the Kyrgyz Republic. So as you can see on this side, it's a highly seismic hazard-prone country, and coincidentally, the high density of school is really concentrated in the area where this seismic hazard is higher. Further than this, the schools are very highly seismic vulnerable. We could see, but Ginger will talk further about this with further details. Very vulnerable building typologies with complex masonry typologies or precast frame. So this is the situation from the resilience to seismic resilience perspective, but on the same way, the schools are very poor energy efficiency. Many of them are still heated with coal. You can see from this picture also how the lighting is, the situation of the lighting is. And as far as the water and sanitation and hygiene is concerned, several schools have outdoor toilets consisting mainly in pit latrine and very poor access to fresh potable water. This is the reason why the intervention in the Kyrgyz Republic has been conceived as a holistic intervention, where retrofitting intervention should cover on the same time seismic structural performance as well as energy efficiency, along with water sanitation and hygiene. So this intervention line could end up in a retrofitting intervention, holistic retrofitting intervention, or the full replacement of the school in certain condition. But again, even for the full replacement, all these structural performance, energy efficiency, and water sanitation and hygiene compliance with the norms should be addressed. So how to understand what was the best solution for each school and what was the best strategy at portfolio level to invest the available money, available budget for this holistic retrofitting intervention. To answer to this question, we have been working all together to design a life cycle multi-criteria multi-criteria assessment framework that I will present briefly. I hope you could still see the screen shared. Okay. All right, as said, we have fundamental pillars of our multi-criteria framework in the 3 pillars of sustainability, environmental, economic, societal sustainability, and on the other side, resilience to natural hazard. In particular, in this project, we have been targeting earthquake resilience and to a certain extent, the resilience to extreme weather event, just looking into schools that are prone to flooding. For these 4 pillars, some indicators have been identified together with the local community, so have been discussed with the local people. Thanks to this discussion, this multi-criteria framework has been outlined. Or further to the identification of the indicators, stakeholders were also involved in assessing the weight for this indicator. It is fair to say that this weighting, so the importance, the relative importance of this indicator within the multi-criteria framework could be adjustable in time to address changing priorities for the government and for the local communities. So that was the multi-criteria, and now we had also to insert the life cycle assessment because what the World Bank wants to make the most out of the upfront investment for reaching this holistic benefit during the full life cycle of the school. So for this reason, we define a multi-criteria and life cycle benefit cost ratio index that has been defined as the ratio between a benefit index and the upfront investment cost. And today we are going to explain briefly how this life cycle benefit index has been defined. So very quickly on life cycle, probably all of you knows about life cycle and the different phases that are considered within life cycle for buildings and infrastructure. For this specific project, not all of these phases have been considered, but we have been limited our analysis to construction use stage and end-of-life stage as far as holistic retrofitting and replacement of the building is concerned, while in cases of no intervention, so leaving the school as they were, we have been assessing life cycle cost or environmental impact only in the use stage and end-of-life stage. So the idea was very simple, to assess all the indicators of the multi-criteria indicators that we have introduced before and after the intervention, and in each one of the life cycle phases that we have been decided to consider, and therefore to assess the positive change resulting from the different possible intervention, retrofitting intervention. So it is fair to say that as far as resilience and social benefit are concerned, we in the end decided to, for the sake of making the work simple, but also for the need to use the real data, we stopped at the assessment we did our assessment as a one-off assessment. So we didn't consider different life cycle phases, but just one assessment in the whole life of the school building. While for economic sustainability and environmental protection, the assessment was done on all the different life cycle phases, as I was mentioning before. again, that was because we wanted to assess the indicator on real data, and it was not possible to have all the data needed for a life cycle assessment when talking about resilience and social benefit. So this slide, I hope, summarize what I've been trying to explain before. And so let's see now how this assessment has been performed at building level. So as far as seismic structural performance intervention are concerned, there have been a lot of study before this one we are presenting to assess together with the local practitioner what could have been the best intervention with seismic retrofitting intervention. Also, in terms of vulnerability assessment, fragility curves assessment, seismic scenario assessment, all the work was already conducted, has been already conducted previously by the ATC Council. So it was very easy having all this available material to assess the first indicators related to resilience to earthquakes. So we had set all these fragility curves, both from impact fragility curves and functional fragility curves. So it was possible, like in this case, given the expected ground motion, to assess what were the expected fatality before and after the intervention. So that for assessing these expected annual human losses, and same for economic losses. While for the downtime, we started from physical impact fragility curves and used the same approach that ASUS is implementing to assess downtime as a function of the expected physical damage. So a bit more challenging was the work for assessing the economic sustainability and the environmental protection indicator. As you see, like here, looking into the holistic retrofitting, for instance, holistic retrofitting is comprising intervention, the structural seismic performance of structural intervention, energy efficiency and wash intervention. And we can see that, we can see that we wanted to assess economic sustainability and environmental protection indicator for all different phases of the life cycle. So let's see how we did that. First of all, we had to define a taxonomy for the wash. Yeah, I'm talking about energy efficiency first. So we had to define a taxonomy for energy efficiency components. Karina before was talking about the glossy taxonomy for school building, and this work here started something on creating taxonomy also for WASH and EE component, which I think is also very important, aiming to characterize the existing condition of the school. So this was done. And also intervention in terms of energy efficiency intervention were defined for different components of the building. As you can see here, I don't want to go into the details, but the third very important step to reach this the assessment of this indicator was to create a library of unitary cost, or unitary environmental impact. So now we are talking about energy efficiency and we are talking about environmental sustainability. So how we performed this assessment. We started from environmental product declaration that are available for internationally for different kind of items. So, for instance, thinking about retrofitting walls to become more energy efficient. So we could think about this kind of intervention, installing a 5 centimeter, for instance, of insulation or 10 centimeter, and we looked into this environmental protection product declaration databases to see per unit or per square meter what was the value of different environmental indicator like the global warming potential or other indicators related to hazardous waste disposal and so on. So thanks to these 3 steps, we were able to assess these environmental protection indicators. So coming back, you see to the indicators of this multi-criteria framework. You just to recap, we had here carbon footprint, waste production, life cycle, recyclable, reusable, recovery material. Okay, so we could calculate starting from the unitary value what was the expected like global warming potential for the walls, let's say, within all the school, and then by doing the summary at all school levels. So unitary values for each indicator. We are considering how much of each component is present inside the school, and we are summarizing all this value. I think for the ones who know life cycle assessment, this is very easy to understand. And then we process all this with a normalization approach in order to be able to aggregate all this value with value with other indicators. So very quickly, let's check water sanitation and hygiene intervention in order to see how the assessment of costs was done. So again, we had to define a taxonomy for classifying wash existing condition, and we had to define a wash retrofitting intervention that could meet at least the minimum requirement by the local standards as well as the Sustainable Development Goals requirements. Again, this was quite a challenging task to identify unit costs for this existing condition, as well as for intervention, wash intervention, along all the life cycle phases of the school. But once done that, it was possible, when adopting a very similar approach to the one shown for environmental protection indicator, it was possible to assess the economic sustainability indicator by doing the same operation. So from unitary costs to component level costs to building level cost, and then proceeding with the normalization. The last point is about the assessment of the social benefit indicator. This has been, again, a quite challenging task as needed to be assessed somehow qualitatively and accounting for the local perception and experience. So we have identified, as I mentioned before, some indicators like how an energy efficiency or eating impact on the well-being of children, or in similarly way, how wash component can affect the quality of water, the reliability of the water service, and therefore can affect the well-being of the children in the school. So we assess all these again at component level, and as said, with assuming a qualitative approach. And therefore, similarly to what done for the economic and environmental indicator, we were able to assess the social benefit indicator as a 1,0 to 1 indicator. And that's all for the assessment approach for this life cycle multi-criteria benefit index approach. The next step were to project this assessment at portfolio level and use the results for informing the decision-making process of the government. But of these two things will be presented by Raphael and by Ginger, so I'll pass to them the floor.
Thank you very much, Sonia. Let me share my screen. Okay, so yes. Thank you, Sonia, for all your presentation. It was all very clear. What we are going to do now is I'm going to share the methodology that we implemented in the Kyrgyz Republic, and then my colleague Jinje will show the results and the specific implementation. So before going to the details of the methodology, I want to take a step back and analyze the situation and exactly what we want to do with all this data that Sonia presented that came from the life cycle assessment. So imagine we have a specific school with a S number of buildings, and what we have is a status quo that is non-investment, non-benefits. And what we have in the other scenario, or in the other extreme position, is, sorry, I think that this is, yeah. So what we have on the other side is we can replace completely each one of these buildings. And if we replace all of the buildings, it will have a huge cost, but we will have a lot of benefits because we will have a modern infrastructure. However, this is certainly not possible to do in the entire portfolio. So what we are interested now is to understand what is in the middle of this, what we can do that we can improve the condition of the students, but we will not have to invest all the money on replacing the existing infrastructure. So in that sense, there are different possibilities. Of course, there are different levels of interventions. There's a specific intervention in which you can improve a little bit the conditions, as we're talking, for instance, retrofitting, a structural retrofitting to go from collapse to life protection. But we can do something better, and we can analyze different intermediate interventions opportunities. What we can see is that as far as we increase the impact of the intervention and the extent of the intervention, this will cost more and more until the value of the replacement. And at the same time, we will have different benefits. For sure, the replacement will give us the best or the highest benefits, and we will have a decrease in benefits as we go towards the least invasive interventions. So what we want to analyze and to use all the information that Sonia already presented in the previous presentation is then to analyze for each one of the buildings what we should do. Should we retrofit? Should we replace it? Or should we do nothing in that sense? And the way of doing that is by a benefit cost analysis. If we have all the costs and we have all the benefits, we can compare them and see when we need to stop in each one of the buildings. So for instance, there's a building that does not need extensive structural retrofitting, so something in the middle can work. But there are some others that are very old and with a high vulnerable typology, so therefore the decision should be to replace them. And the tricky part of this is not actually identify the costs. identify the cost is usually a straightforward process while you define, if you already have defined the interventions. But what is a bit difficult to define is what are these benefits? How can I measure the benefits of a specific intervention? So here comes all that Sonia was showing before, all the aspects related to resilience, to economic sustainability, to environment, and to social. So in this sense, what we can do is evaluate the benefits through a multi-criteria utility function in which we have different criterias, each one of these subdivided. So Sonia was explaining how the expected annual economic downtime and human losses were calculated, also how the life cycle cost, the carbon footprint, the waste production, and so on. So we can take all these values and the before and after and identify an intervention, how much will improve this multi-criteria utility function. And here we have two things that we need to establish. The first is the score in each one of these parameters. So this was what Sonia already presented. And the second is to define the weights to assign to each of these criteria. The process of assigning the weights is not a trivial process. In here, what we did was in agreement with and in some consultations with local stakeholders, we define these values that you can see in this slide. But the advantage of this type of methodologies is that if the situation change or the decision maker changes its own priorities, then we can come back, change these weights, and then reprocess the results so we can have a different prioritization. So what we can do with this is I have a specific school with some buildings. Each one of these buildings will have a specific intervention. What we can do in each one is do nothing to retrofit it or to replace it. The issue now is that the retrofitting should not only consider the seismic structural or the resilience aspect, we need to consider the holistic intervention of the building, because we are also analyzing the benefits holistically. So the intervention should improve all of these aspects. So we have the seismic structural performance, the energy efficiency, the water and sanitation hygiene, and to include additional classrooms if needed. And this is also connected with what Karina was presented at the beginning, that is this right plus framework, in which the idea is to make the PLEs or the physical learning environments a better tool for learning in that sense. And of course, we always have the option to replace each building or this specific building with a new construction that complies all the national regulation. So we will have a environment that will comply all the national standards. So now we divided the prioritization process in two tiers. The first one is let's analyze building by building, and the second is let's analyze this school by school. So for the building level prioritization, what we do is to analyze, as mentioned before, the costs and the benefits for each intervention. So if we do nothing, then we will have no cost, but certainly we will have also no benefits. If we retrofit, we will have a specific value and a specific value of cost and a specific benefit. And if we replace, we will have also a similar situation. But now what we will have is a higher cost and also high benefits. What we can do in here is for the benefits, as I mentioned before, we will need to use this multi-criteria utility function, and we need to evaluate this function in the current conditions and in the intervened conditions, so we can identify how much it increased for using the specific intervention. And this process at the end gives us what to do in each building. So if, for instance, we need to retrofit it or if we need to replace it. Just 1 minute. And having the benefits and the cost, we can calculate a benefit cost ratio. And with this, we will define the interventions per building. And this is a process that needs to be implemented recurrently in all the buildings in the portfolio. At the moment, without considering the school as a whole, but at building level only. But it's important also to consider that there are additional non-technical considerations. And for instance, the local regulations plays a pivotal role in the definition of what to do in each building. So, for instance, in the Kyrgyz Republic case, by local regulation, adobe buildings and unreinforced masonry are not uh, are not suitable to be used for a school building. So in this sense, if the school is adobe, then in this specific case, it needs to be demolished and replaced. In the specific case of the Kyrgyz Republic, the reinforced masonry was shown that was not cost efficient to retrofit. So the decision was to replace as well. And then there are other specific considerations. So, for instance, one of the policies of the country was to reduce the overcrowded schools. So, in that sense, we can analyze if each building is in an overcrowded or not, or an underutilized school, and use this information also to make decisions for replacement or retrofitting. And finally, we can use, of course, the BCR for the last decision, if we go to replacement or if we go to retrofitting. So what we wanted to show with this slide is that even though what we can do with the benefit cost ratio can give us the cost-effective intervention, we also need to consider these additional non-technical considerations in the decision-making process. Then if we go now to this tier 2 prioritization, now we are talking at the school level. We have a specific number of schools, each one with a specific number of buildings. And for each building, we already defined an intervention with the previous prioritization. So now what we did in this specific project is let's group now all the buildings in each school and sum all the benefits and sum all the costs, and now calculate an additional benefit cost ratio, but at school level and not at building level. And including in here an additional non-technical consideration, and is that if the cost of the intervention of the entire school is more than 70% of the replacement value of the school, then the school will be selected for replacement in its entirety. And with this, by doing this BCR in all the schools, then we can have an ordered list of interventions now at school level. So we can identify which school is the most priority and which one is the least. So in that sense, we can start ordering, for instance, the intervention. So in this figure, what you can see is at the beginning, the intervention with highest BCR, and at the end of this graph, the intervention with lowest BCR. And what we can see from here and from this specific figure is that the most expensive interventions are grouped here at the end. So this gives us an idea that at least this subset at the beginning should not include any of these expensive intervention. This can be because the school is not so big or because the intervention is not so invasive, and we will need to analyze case by case. But what we will have is a list like this one in which we can identify each school and the level of priority in this list. And other thing that we can also do is take this list and start making a cumulative analysis of the cost and a cumulative analysis of the multi-criteria utility function increase. So what we will have is a figure like this, in which we can identify that at the beginning, the interventions, specific interventions will increase a lot the multi-criteria utility function, but at the end, an intervention will be with the same cost will increase very low the multi-criteria utility function. So what we can see, or how this can be interpreted, is, for instance, we can identify the slope in this curve. So at the beginning, the interventions are very efficient, and at the end, the interventions are not so efficient at all. So with this, we can identify, for instance, the optimal level of investment. So how much do I need to invest? Certainly, I don't need to retrofit or intervene all the buildings in the portfolio. I can select the subset will give me the best or the highest increase in the utility function or the highest benefits with the least amount of money in this case. And as I mentioned at the beginning, all this is organized by the weights. So we can, for instance, define this type of figures for different profiles. So what if we give more importance to resilience. In here, what we call a resilience biased profile. Or if we give more importance to the social criteria, then the prioritization will change, and also the optimal levels of investment will change as well. The results I presented were more indicative, and now Ginger will present the specific results for the Kyrgyz Republic. Before that, I just want to talk about how this can be improved in future developments and what type of limitations this analysis has. So the first one is we need to certainly enhance the transparency of the optimization process. So these multi-criteria frameworks are very useful to consider different things at the same time, but in some cases it gives like this black box perception, like what I'm actually doing and how this prioritization is implemented. But this can be addressed, and this is something that we have discussed a lot, and is doing this type of sensitivity analysis or scenario-based analysis, in which different conditions can be analyzed to identify the impact of each criteria on this prioritization. And this will also give information on the relevance of this criteria in the specific portfolio of schools that we have in a specific country. The second point is to refine the stakeholder engagement in the weight assignment. So what we can do in this type of exercises is to try different scenarios, different decision-making profiles, make this sensitivity analysis. But at the end, what is important is what we want to do and what we want to implement in the field. And for this, is very important to incorporate the decision-making preference using these weights. And there are different methodologies to do that, such as the analytical hierarchy process or the optimal sampling method, or many others that exist in the literature. But this needs to be done through a participatory process in which all the key stakeholders are gathered together, and we can make decisions on which criteria should be the most important ones, and the ones with the highest levels or the highest weights in the multi-criteria utility function. Then we have also a temporal variability on the criterion scores. So as any type of data is dynamic, and we see that the scores that we are giving now with the life cycle assessment can change in the future because we have better information, or because the baseline condition change. So this is something that needs to be included, and this type of decision-making frameworks are not static in that sense. We need to ensure that this is flexible, and if in 10 years or 5 years anything changes, then updating all this process needs to be relatively easy, and in that sense can be updated in the future. And finally, this is a tool to support the decision-making process, and is not intended certainly to replace human decisions in this. So the idea of this type of analysis, and what we implemented in the Kyrgyz Republic, is to support the decision-making process with evidence-based analysis. So to use information to then take wise decisions. But at the end, there are many additional things that need to be considered, not only the regulations that I presented before, but also public perception on specific types of buildings, needs on specific regions, for instance, in the country, as many others that we will see in a minute. So this was like the technical process, and then the next step is now to use this to define intervention programs. And this is what my colleague Ginger is going to present in a moment. So thank you, and Ginger, please go ahead.
Thank you, Rafa. I will share my screen. Are you seeing my screen okay?
Yes, we can see it.
Oh. So thank you for the presentation from Sonia and Rafael. So now, building on their presentations, I will share the implementation of those methodology in the case of Kyrgyz Republic. So just a quick recap of the background of Kyrgyz Republic. So as Sonia mentioned before, the country is highly exposed to earthquakes, and majority of the school buildings, unfortunately, are either located in Zone 9 or Zone 8, according to the local seismic design code. So that's a major issue to address. And also, when we look at the vulnerability of all the school buildings, and we see almost 30% of the building was over, I mean, they're over 50 years old. And also, when we look at the different building types in schools, we realize that over 80% of the school buildings are those types likely not meeting life safety under design level earthquake. And in particular, the major vulnerable building types we identified include complex masonry, which dominates 45% of the buildings, especially for those ones built before 2010, where when they had improvement in the standard design of schools. And also the second one is adobe buildings that we're all aware are very vulnerable under earthquakes. And followed will be precast frame and also complex masonry, concrete frame, and unreinforced masonries. So within those last three, I would also like to highlight in this country of Kyrgyz Republic, the precast frames are a particular vulnerable building type we see in schools because they are usually very large schools because of the vulnerability of the precast frame. A lot of school children's lives are at risk. And on top of the seismic vulnerability in the schools, there's also a common lack of functional conditions in terms of water sanitation, hygiene, and energy efficiency. And we understood there less than half schools have centralized water supply with indoor plumbing, and only marginal schools have centralized indoor sewage plumbing, and majority of the schools are using outdoor toilet, like dry toilets. And on the energy efficiency side, majority of the schools does not have hot water supply and are not having proper ventilation, are not having adequate insulation, and 72% of the schools are still using coal as heating source, and also are using asbestos cement sheet roofing, which poses, both of them poses environmental risk and also health risk to students. And last but not least, on top of the previous mentioned challenges, the school infrastructure network in the country are also facing imbalanced planning. So we observe overcrowded schools that's not meeting the growing population demand across all oblasts in the country, especially those large cities, including Bishkek City and Osh City. And on the other side, there's also underutilized schools we observed, especially in those remote areas. Okay, so with those multi-dimensional and competing needs that the government is facing to address, they have this education development strategy laying out those priorities to improve the school infrastructure quality by 2040. But how the government can go from the reality with multi-dimensional challenges to the objective of high quality school infrastructure. The ERIC project helped with the government with a strategic plan, including practical planning tools from intervention strategy to investment program to implementation program. And in today's presentation, we would like to particularly share results building onto the prioritization methodology to come up with the intervention strategy and the investment program. So it proposes the direction to efficiently plan the public expenditure on school infrastructure for maximized holistic benefits covering resilience, economic sustainability, environment protection, and social benefits. So first, about the intervention strategy, the project developed guidelines to inform the planning of the government. As Sonia explained, also Rafael explained as well, the intervention lines are organized of 2 lines, retrofit and replacement. And under retrofit, a holistic approach has been taken to address structural, wash, energy efficiency, as well as additional classroom to meet the enrollment demand. And specifically under structural safety, the criteria is to ensure life safety under design level earthquake. And for water sanitation and hygiene is to provide adequate condition for students according to the local regulations. And for energy efficiency, the solution was designed to meet the Class B requirement per the local regulations. And for additional classroom, the criteria was to meet the capacity in order for the education to be conducted no more than 2 shifts in the school. And in terms of replacement, similarly, it's addressing a holistic aspect. And on top of structural, wash, energy efficiency, and the design capacity, it also have the opportunities to improve the design of the learning environment to become more modern and effective for learning. So I will not repeat the methodology because it's all explained in detail before. So the results, unlike the results presented by Rafael, that's the overall utility function over the cost. But in the case of engaging stakeholders and informing decision-making, we have to break down in more detail for transparency and also more easier adoption and communicating all the risks being addressed. So in this particular case, in this graph, we are presenting 1 major benefit indicator per objective. So for resilience, which is the light blue curve in the graph, showing the cumulative life saved from future earthquakes. And then from the economic sustainability objective, we're showing here the cumulative life cycle cost saving per year. And for the third objective, environment protection, the graph is showing in green line the cumulative green global warming potential reduction in terms of kilogram carbon dioxide equivalent per year reduced. And for the social benefits objective, here is showing the most relevant indicator, that's cumulative overcrowded building blocks addressed. And we also have this red line is showing the financing budget that can possibly be allocated based on the financial projection by 2040. So we can see that theoretically, so this results is purely theoretical. By 2040, the available budget projected could possibly address majority of the issues and achieve majority of the portfolio potential in terms of benefit. So there's one line I would like to explain a little more is the life cycle cost. We see some cases it's actually increased the life cycle cost. That is because in some schools, there were not even any proper functional facilities for wash, for energy efficiency, though there were no recurrent costs for maintenance, for repair, for replacement of elements. So after implement proper intervention to bring those functionality back, that life cycle costs actually for those particular schools is negative in terms of saving. But the overall portfolio is a positive saving. And that's why we see the curve could some cases ending in negative. But with theoretical coverage of the budget allowed, we should be able to achieve all the maximum benefit possible. But in reality, we going through this theoretical methodology and the results, the technical results, we have to like explain to the stakeholder and understand their other side of the agenda, policy agenda and development priorities, so that this can turn into a practical and implementable intervention program. So in that case, building on the intervention lines and solutions identified and building level, for the school level to organize the intervention strategy, we further organized and grouped the schools into these 5 groups. But the first group, of course, is to understand how many schools already have finance secured. So that should not be considered in future financing programs. So first we remove those, and then that left us 4 major intervention groups to be formulated and programmed. The first one is dilapidated schools. This is considering the pressing need that's being voiced through the community to Ministry of Education. Actually, every year, the Ministry of Education have to understand the most pressing needs from addressing those dilapidated schools. So those are the ones we take out as group 1. And the second group, what we suggest is to further take out critical vulnerability schools for this group called critical vulnerability reduction. So this particular group, we propose to include adobe buildings, unreinforced masonry, and precast reinforced concrete frames as the critical vulnerable buildings. So that should be addressed as one of the priority as a standalone group. And then the third group we proposed is for enlarging school capacity. So to address those pressure from growing population. So those schools with overcrowded conditions will be taking in for this group to be addressed. And then the rest of the schools do not have those critical features, will be organized as general school improvements as the last group. And with this intervention strategy proposed, the government can understand what is the distribution of intervention lines and categories under each group. And we can already see for dilapidated schools, of course, majority of them will probably require replacement. And of course, also for adobe unreinforced masonry, due to the local regulations, adobe have to be replaced. And of course, for unreinforced masonry, we will, based on the consideration of cost efficiency, doing retrofit and replacement, as mentioned by Rafael, which is the 70% of the replacement ratio. We end up with also majority of them, we recommend it to be replaced. And for precast frame, about half, more than half. So more than half we recommended for retrofitting and 24% for replacement. This is based on this replacement ratio discussed and consolidated with stakeholder about the 70% of the replacement ratio. And the group 2, in terms of the other critical vulnerable buildings, similar distribution was observed. And for enlarging school capacity, most of them can be retrofitted. And in the general school improvements also, majority of them can be retrofitted. And with the intervention strategy consolidated, then it's the investment strategy, and the project provided recommendations to the Ministry of Education in Kyrgyz Republic. So for that, a financing projection has been done based on the historical GDP growth and the allocation of public expenditure on education sector and further on school infrastructure. And there are 3 scenarios being presented to the ministry. And the final scenario selected is the business as usual. And under that scenario, it is estimated to fully address all the investment needs in the portfolio by 2053. And however, with the program that's by 2040, it is still possible to do more than the timeline aligned, because of the prioritization approach, that the results indicated that even by 2040, we will be spending 35% of the total investment need, but it's possible to benefit 55% of the students and 63% of the schools with those intervention needs. And the government can also understand within the time frame by 2040, how many buildings is recommended for retrofit and how many are estimated to be replaced. And also in terms of investment needs, government could see the approximation of the cost per different intervention lines. And in terms of communicating this prioritization results and the implementation sequence of different priority groups, what we recommended is to first in parallel implement group 1 through group 3, which focused on dilapidated schools and adobe and unreinforced masonry and precast frame as the critical vulnerability group. And also there's group 3 about enlarging school capacity to address the overcrowded situations. So those 3 groups going parallel until 2037. And then the rest will be sequentially address the last group, general school improvements. And for communicating the sequence, then this graph shows the number of students benefited per million USD invested in a very straightforward way to engage stakeholders and explain the benefit and justify the sequence. So with that, that's all the results we would like to share in this case implementation in Kyrgyz Republic. And in the end, we would also like to share some lessons learned and recommendations from such implementation. That the first thing is that it is very essential for the prioritization framework to adapt to the local context and accommodate to limitations on data availability and local capacity. In this particular case, we're very lucky that there being a few years of data collection already done under ERIC project. So we do have a good amount of data to work with in terms of quantifying those benefit indicators and understanding the estimation of cost of intervention and everything. And also there have been challenges in terms of working with local engineers to provide quality inputs to the necessary quantification of benefit indicators and feeding to the prioritization framework. But thanks to the work of Sonia, that we were able to collect inputs from local engineers in a very structured and clear and more prescriptive way. So quality inputs were able to be collected and used. And the second point we would like to highlight is continuous stakeholder engagement during the prioritization process is really key, such as what Rafa mentioned, defining the criteria and the weights. And this is for the whole framework to align with the development priorities and facilitate stakeholder adoption with adequate understanding. And in fact, to date, this technical report summarizing the methodology and the proposed solutions and results have been taken in constructively by the Vice Prime Minister's office, and an official order has been ordered to develop an actual policy document on this national plan to be implemented in the country, and assigned the Ministry of Education as the leader to develop such policy. So right now this work is still ongoing, but we already see the progress of this proposal being taken in constructively in the local government. And the next point I would like to share is for sustainable outcome on the ground and long-term impact of results. We really see strengthening local capacity and integration to the local system is a must. And here in this particular case, we were able to, in the process of integrate necessary baseline information, as well as potentially any relevant indicators to the education management information system. And currently, a school infrastructure module, in addition to the existing MS system, is being developed towards the end phase of the development, so that necessary school infrastructure baseline information will be held there and being updated over time to inform the future planning over time as well. And the last but not the least point, we would really like to take the opportunity today for all the future work of researchers and practitioners to advocate we all to consider practical application targeting the priority developing needs to enable impact on the ground, and especially to consider those contexts of the developing world, because those are the cases that might not be ideal as we do our research work and might need to face a lot of limitation and challenges when it's being implemented on the ground. So with that, it concluded our presentation today. So we'll stop sharing my screen.
Thank you very much, Jinji. Thank you all.
Thank
I would
you.
like to give Karina the word if you want Karina to give some final remarks, and then to Professor Dina to close the session and moderate the Q&A.
Thank you, everyone. I just would like to highlight a few points which have been critical in the Kyrgyz Republic, but also in all countries we have been working on. The first is the need to identify new financing mechanisms. We have seen that in the Kyrgyz Republic, the needs are huge. And if we compare the investment that has been possible in the education sector over the past years, we conclude that there is the need actually to mobilize additional financing to be able to cover the needs and to implement that school infrastructure plan that Ginger mentioned. One solution does not fit all. So this is very much also related with the context in the country, but this is one of the priorities. The second, I think the presentations today made it clear how risk information is so important and how that information that is produced perhaps by many of you that are connected today needs to reach these institutions, needs to reach policy and decision makers. You have seen that because that risk information has been used in the design of the ERIC project, and it has been used in the preparation of the intervention strategy for the plan, you are able to understand how much we are able to maximize in terms of the risk reduction gains with the limited resources that are already available. For instance, there is one number that I think illustrates very well this. After we undertake this prioritization process, we reach the conclusion that by prioritizing the top 340 schools, most vulnerable schools, which represents only 20% of the total investment that would be needed in the country to address the needs of the entire portfolio. Only 20% of the investment would provide 75% of the risk reduction, which means that we were able through this approach to identify where risk is concentrated. And that is new in the Kyrgyz Republic and is actually new in Central Asia. The other point that I wanted to highlight is the importance of integrated approaches, which has been also emphasized by all colleagues, including Sonia. When we do retrofitting, we reach the conclusion that we need to address also the other needs: energy efficiency, water and sanitation. And it's not just from a planning perspective, but also from a cost efficiency perspective. We have concluded that we can have savings of up to 40% if we do retrofitting together with energy efficiency. The next point that I wanted to highlight is there are technical solutions for retrofitting one school. But the problem is how these countries that need to do these interventions over hundreds, thousands of buildings, what are the solutions they have to do this at large scale? And in order to do that, they also need to do policy reforms, including, and I think this point maybe is the most relevant for you today, building codes. This ERIC project, when we start negotiating with the government, at that time, the building codes that were active in the Kyrgyz Republic were from the Soviet period. And the local engineering community had already identified that there were significant gaps in terms of safety provisions in those building codes. But of course, the projects that are financed by the bank, they need to comply with the local regulations. But the local regulations had these critical gaps. So it was essential to first support the country in updating those building codes. But that updating a building code is not a simple and short-term effort. So it also requires to put in place effective enforcement mechanisms and building the capacity of institutions, the technical community in the country in adopting those new engineering provisions. That is a very complex process that takes time. This ERIC project was able to support the government in initiating those critical reforms, but they will need to continue in order for this plan to be implemented. And I would like also to emphasize one point based on our experience in multiple countries. My background is also in engineering, and I understand that when we update the building code, we are focused on technical requirements and safety requirements. But we need to remember that these codes will need to be implemented. So it means that they need to be compatible with the local economic and social context. So my recommendation to our community is that we need to, when we update building regulations, we need to look at how they are going to be implemented, the cost efficiency of those provisions, because otherwise what is going to happen is that those codes are not actually enforced, are not implemented. And finally, the institutional capacity. I think in the Kyrgyz Republic, that has been perhaps the main challenge, because these interventions, they will need to be designed by local experts, but they also need to be validated, reviewed, and endorsed by government institutions. And those government institutions also need to understand those new engineering methods and those new technologies. Again, that institutional capacity is one of the main challenges that we need to address if you want these interventions to be implemented at large scale. And the first step to achieve that is to have at least a plan, a long-term strategies that those institutions can rely on in order to plan the next steps, and then to do all the things that I mentioned before, policy reforms, mobilizing, financing. So I will complete my final remarks here, because there is so much to discuss about this topic, but we really believe that here at the bank we really believe that supporting the education sector in terms of building resilience is really one of the most important contributions we can make to the communities and the countries we work with. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Karina, for these final remarks. And indeed, the idea of improving the education infrastructures in order to improve the sustainable development of countries is perfectly aligned with the sustainability goals and with the Sendai framework for disaster risk reduction. So we are all pushing the boat in the same direction, which is very good to know. But also, I very much agree with you that the social and human capital that you need in order to improve and strengthen the existing, let's say, school portfolio, but not just the school portfolio, the building portfolio to reduce seismic risk, has also very much to do with education, starting from the training of new generation of engineers, but also updating the existing engineers that are in the country and that needs to support the in-country effort to deliver the retrofitting. So yes, that double actions and working with the institution is actually fundamental, and it should maybe more often be part of the overall lending package rather than just thinking about the brick and mortars. And with this, I think it would be worth to open. We have quite a number of questions, which I hope that we can quickly answer because we don't have so much time. So the first one is for Karina. I'm aware that it's from Anshu Kumar. He would like to know whether you have programs in Nepal. The answer is yes. But whether you're working in construction of school building or other aspects of schools as well.
Yes, in Nepal, we have an engagement that includes technical assistance, financing, and also contingency financing under a development financing project with a credit. But basically, in Nepal, we don't have any dedicated project specifically for risk reduction of schools. But our education colleagues, they have projects for the construction of new schools. But there are some instruments to support the government in case there is disasters, and we are doing this type of capacity building work also with the federal government, but also with local municipalities. Local municipalities at the moment they manage a large part of the school portfolio in the country. Thank you.
Very much, Karina, for the quick answers. And then there is a question or a statement, I would say, by Mikhail Melkumian about the cost of retrofitting of school buildings. Mikhail, maybe you want to very briefly explain how you could implement your retrofitting at 3 to 5 times less the price related to conventional retrofitting, please.
Oh, yes, thank you. that you mentioned my questions. I think this is very important to develop technologies which allows us to significantly decrease the price of retrofitting. Otherwise, you cannot compete. I mean, we do that without moving children out of the schools and without interrupting the functioning of the schools. I think this is extremely important, and I'm very happy to report that we have already extensive experience in doing such type of retrofittings, not only for school buildings, but also for hospitals, hotels, residential buildings. And I'm proud to say that all these things we are doing without interrupting the functioning of the buildings.
In which national context are you talking about?
Sorry?
From which nations are you operating? In which state are you operating?
I am living in Armenia. I am Armenian scientist and engineer, but I'm doing a lot of lectures across the world, being invited by different institutions, companies. Just last month, I was lecturing in Malaysia, and altogether, I was lecturing in about 36 countries.
Oh,
so all what I'm doing in my country, in Armenia, but I'm traveling a lot to different countries, trying to pass my knowledges and experience to the younger generation.
Thank you. So maybe if you have a list of relevant information about retrofitting school, you can share it with us, and we will be able to share it with our audience. Thank you very much.
Yes, of course.
Mikhail.
Yes, of course. I will do that. I will send you a paper about the school building, and you will see how efficient it is.
Thank you very much. There is a question from Catherine Coates. Catherine, if you want to ask it yourself. You should be able to.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. Hi. Please, go ahead.
Hi, Dina. Nice to see you. Thank you so much to all the presenters. It was a really fascinating set of talks. And I guess maybe my question comes on from the last person in a way, in that I was wondering if you are considering incremental retrofits for, when the retrofits start happening, and maybe sort of related to that, are temporary classrooms being considered, or maybe even building sort of new buildings on sites where additional capacity is needed as a first step? Thank you.
I don't know if Ginger or Sonia want to answer this. Probably Ginger more.
Yeah, I can take this question, and my colleagues can complement for additional information if needed. So we did consider incremental retrofit at the beginning when we tried to develop the retrofit solutions. However, when we understand deeper the local seismic code requirements and also the permitting process, it's not possible for us to actually implement like lower level of incremental retrofit, because the local seismic design code is still more like a force-based approach. So it has a higher requirement on the strength, but there's not requirements on ductility. So that is why like a lower level incremental retrofit option will not be able to get permitted and implemented. So in the end, it's only like the I think it's the level 3 that's. So we had 2 levels below that, but there was only level 3 get past the local requirements and actually being able to implement it. So that's the answer to that question. And for the use of temporary classrooms and additional new buildings to improve capacity, under ERIC project, currently it's financing 40 schools, and right now there are 13 schools under construction. And for those schools, some of them already had this social safeguard plan on relocating students to nearby schools. And some of them were actually decided to have the children relocated in one building of the on the school campus, while the retrofit or constructing the other buildings on the campus. And we don't like right now, we don't have a case that has temporary classroom built. It's more under the ERIC project, it's more evaluated case by case, because the project, when it comes to implementation, the feasibility study and detailed design have to be developed for each particular site conditions. So that's the situation right now. And under ERIC, with agreement with the government, when the school is being retrofitted, we're only touching the existing buildings. So now actually no new classrooms added, but when building a new building, it will be meeting the enrollment demand for allowing no more than 2 shifts. So that's the situation now, but in particular, as this technical report proposal to inform the future school infrastructure plan in the country, what we're proposing is even for retrofitting, we should consider add additional classroom to meet the demand. So that's my answer, and I'm not sure if Rafael or Kalina.
Thank you. I think there are other questions that will contribute to that answer as well. Thank you very much, Catherine, for asking the question in the first place. And we have Rabindra Adhikari. He's interested in the weighting. So Rabindra, I don't know if you want to very briefly ask your question, or please go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for the nice presentation. So I was wondering, so the work seemed to be scalable for other parts of the world as well. And then so I was interested, like it should be done with some level of automation. So the weight is, so as far as I understand, it should depend on the nature of the building we are using. So maybe some building of the same school may be for the administrative purpose, and some maybe for early childhood program, and some for the adults. So and even in many cases, I don't know about there, but here in Nepal, so many schools have wash facilities outside the building, which is used for the classrooms. So that I think that will change the priority or weightage given to each building. So if we are able to define the type of building or function of the building, and then assign the weight accordingly, and then it can be automated, then it seems effective. So it's from the perspective to implement here. So I was interested if that has already been done, or what's the plan. So the next part is what was the next part? It was
about the weighting, I think. So yes, maybe Rafa, you can answer that question, that part of the question.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much, Dina, and thank you, Rabindra, for your questions. I think that, yeah, what you say is very important. How we are doing and what we proposed in here is this multi-criteria utility function, and this function is comprised actually by 2 important parts. One are the scores in each one of the criterions, and the second, the weights associated to each one, when integrated into just one value. So for you to make comparable 2 buildings in different schools, you need to have the same weights in all, but the impact of what you are saying, specifically if one has indoor bathrooms or if it has a a better or a worse level of resilience, it will be included as part of the score in each one of the criterions. So, for instance, if we are talking about safety, this is measured with the expected annual losses. So one building will have higher expected annual losses than the other. So this will be included in the multi-criteria utility function, but both will be analyzed with the same weights. And the idea of having the same weights in all the portfolio is actually to make these measures comparable. So what you are saying is actually included in this utility function, and it's automatically included in all the buildings, in all the portfolio, in all the schools.
Yeah. So the second part was the minimum threshold for weightage. For example, if the resilience is poor, but the overall score is reasonable, then on the priority list, it will go at a later stage. But we may want a minimum threshold of resilience, seismic resilience. So is it considered?
It is indeed, Ravindra, considered. So as I explained, and then Jinje showed in further details, there are two processes. One is the BCR and the specific order and prioritization based only on the costs and the benefits obtained with this multi-criteria utility function. But then there is a second process in which some of these thresholds that you are mentioning were included, and some specific additional not saying non-technical, but additional from the prioritization process were considered, such as this. So this is something that certainly needs to be considered, and it's part and was part of this analysis made in the Kyrgyz Republic.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Raphael, and thank you for the very relevant questions. I think it's linked to a certain extent to the next questions, which I think Sonia was trying to answer but you can give the answer by speaking to everybody. From America, I don't know if you would like to ask the question. It's about how are we including resilience in and integrated into seismic structural performance. Please, America.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you for all the presenters and the organizer for this great presentation. Yes, and as Dina was saying, my question was more related to how is resilience considered here, as we have learned that life safety, even of course, is very important. It's not enough to really be resilient, because it can take years to go back to school or to go back to normality. So how was resilience being considered? That was my question. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, America, for the question. And yeah, I was also answering the first part about the 2011 Christchurch earthquake. I had my children there in a school, and they were perfectly safe because the school was completely undamaged thanks to modern seismic design. So indeed, I applaud to the global program for safer school to make this situation for all school in the world. But yes, your question about resilience is very relevant. We want not only life safety, but we want to have functionality of school building as soon as possible, because this is the driver for community to go back after disaster, to go back to life. We included in the analysis in terms of downtime. So we assessed which retrofit intervention could reduce also the downtime, so the closure of the school after possible earthquake events. For sure, we could even improve this assessment by introducing a resilience assessment on different life cycle phases, and after maybe earthquake, how quickly we can retrofit intervention that allow for very quick repairs, or retrofitting intervention that allow for no damage, so that or minimum damage, so that functionality could be 100% soon after the earthquake event. So something was done and something could be improved indeed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sonia.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think this issue of the recovery and the speed of recovery is very important and relevant, especially for education. And of course, In some country now, school buildings are designed to be for immediate occupancy, but this is still not the majority in the majority of the countries. And of course, we have the issue of whether when we retrofit existing buildings, typically in countries where existing retrofitting code for retrofitting is in place, the minimum requirement is not that they meet the new the code condition for new build, but some proportion of it, so they still remain at a higher risk than new build. Now, for existing school, of course, the government and the relevant ministry can require more stringent requirements, but the issue then, I think, is back to whether the economic resources are there to bring those building and those assets to the relevant level of resilience. Thank you very much, America, for the questions. There is a question from Gary about building materials. Gary, maybe you want to, yes, please, with your hands on, please go ahead. In fact, you have two questions. So,
all right. Can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Thank you. Interesting presentation. Internet was sporadic, so I didn't get maybe everything. 3 points. Miyamoto International has an enormous database on retrofit and methodology. I think it's worth an outreach to them. And that regarding the use of schools during retrofit, it depends on if it's multiple buildings and you're phasing or whatever. Health and safety is something which we're trying to raise within Asia, which is really very low on the list and misunderstood generally. Secondly, on the materials side, I think one of the special classifications we're finding in Nepal is the use of riverbed pebbles, boulders. It's like building with marbles, and it is generally quite frightening. And I think that one needs a special classification by itself because that has enormous risks. And beyond that, this is what I wasn't too sure whether it was included in earlier discussion, was the environment of the school. One thing is looking at the structure of the school, but also its environment. We have a changing environment for multiple reasons, including the increase of potential forest fires in the surrounding areas, which are now affecting the human penetration into those forests, but also flood, flash flood, runoff flash floods, and mudslides, but that includes then landslides and rockfall, and not just from saturation, but also from earthquake and tremors, and not necessarily just large earthquakes. So, you know, the environment is the school in the right place? Many of us have visited schools all over the world and question, why on earth was it ever built here? And therefore, I think we need a closer inspection of that, and not just for today, but what is likely to happen in that environment over the next sort of 20, 30 years. So for the life of the school investment and its building. So those are just a few points I'd like to raise if there is any response. Thank you.
Who wants to go first? Karina or Sonia or
Sonia, if you want to go ahead, please.
Yeah, yes, I can answer. So this particular typology of masonry that you are mentioning, the one simple stone, let's say river stone. Yeah, of course, we don't know if it's a typology that is there in Kyrgyz, but yeah, I don't think so, because we have as a most vulnerable typology adobe, and that's been considered for demolition and rebuilding. But then maybe Ginger on this point can add more. As for your other question about other kind of natural hazard, you are completely right. It's not only flooding, because maybe I replied to you by writing that schools that were located in flood-prone areas were considered for relocation. You are right that there are further risks like mud, landslide induced by flash flood or forest fire. Unfortunately, it was not possible to consider all of those. But then Ginger, please confirm this, because there was no several studies in terms of representing the level of hazard for these hazards, so flash flood, landslide. So we had hazard maps at national level or regional level from civil protection, but not detailed hazard assessment that would justify the demolition of school. But Ginger, please compliment or just say I'm not right.
No, I think you answered pretty good. I don't know if Kalina would like to add anything.
Maybe just a few reflections on your point, Gary. As Sonia mentioned, indeed, our efforts is to implement a multi-hazard approach, and if we look from a perspective of damage, economic losses, physical losses, and fatalities, earthquakes come up as in some countries one of the most, perhaps the most significant hazard. But if we look from the perspective of education disruptions, so number of days that the school is closed, then you will see that in many countries, and I can give examples, for instance, in East Africa, floods, heat waves, they become very prominent. And as a matter of fact, you mentioned about Nepal. In the south of Nepal, in the Terai area, every year many schools are closed because of heat waves. And the solutions often is not expensive. It's just a matter of planning and awareness and having access to the right data in order to design those integrated interventions. We are doing some work in Nepal now that focus on that, but also on the point that you mentioned of construction technologies, and some of them that are perhaps being implemented and are not properly validated or tested. No, we work with the Ministry of Urban Development, and in particular with the UDBC, the Department of Urban Development, who develops the building codes in Nepal. And as part of that support to the UDBC, we are identifying in the different municipalities of Nepal what is the most cost-efficient building technologies. And this aligns with a government priority for using local materials for reconstruction and for new buildings in Nepal. This order was issued after the Jajjakot and Doti earthquakes in November 2023. And because the selection of construction technologies is dependent on different factors, safety, but also related with the social development potential, the potential for job creation in those locations, availability of materials. So I don't want to take much of your time, but indeed this is an important point, and we have been working with the government on that.
Thank you. Thank you, Karina. And a more general point, and I think this one then leads us to the closure and to the discussion on the future workshops as well. While we can look at the school and school portfolios, and we can relatively easily, let's say from an engineering point of view, understand their fragility and vulnerability to different type of hazards, and therefore we can determine approach, or even for performance-based design for resistance to flooding or resistance to hurricane and windstorm. More importantly is the fact that many nations do not have the same level of understanding of the hazards on their territory for other type of perils. It seems, it might seem strange because to a certain extent they are more evident than earthquakes are, but the engineering and the seismology community has really made a global effort to map hazards worldwide to quite a reasonable extent and consistent extent, for instance, through the GEM model. At the level of flooding, just about now, people are getting together and to develop this type of resource. But flooding is also much more localized and related to local topography, local orology, and other aspects, and even relatively quick changes in urban morphology. So, having a thorough level of assessment of the hazard relating to the position of a school might be quite difficult, and forecasting what that hazard will be in 20 years, even more so. But certainly there is a need to do this in the futures. And indeed, in the next two talks that we have for our webinar series, we as Rafael had shown before, and maybe Rafael, you can just get into the websites and show the interventions. We are going to really look at what are both flood hazard and flood defenses in countries that are dealt with flooding for a long time, such as the Netherlands, and what they have done from the 50s to, in the last 70 years to improve their resilience to flooding. And then we are going to see at an initial proposal of a global model for flooding with Professor Paul Bates. With this, so please stay tuned in the next months or months and a half to learn more about this aspect. But with this, I would really very much like to thank our speakers today, Karina Fonseca, Sonia Giovinazzi, Jin Cheng-Wu, and Rafael Fernandez, for a very interesting, very well integrated talk, which has really shown a lot of light on the process of really implementing plans, retrofitting plans at scale, at national scales in a developing country. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye. Bye now.